Yes, Mr. Beer.
Thank you. Mr. Sethi, we just left at the point at which your contract was terminated. Can I ask, did they, the Post Office, terminate the contract for Harold Park too?
No, sir. Only for Kings Road, Brentford.
Only the 99 Kings Road one?
Yes, sir.
And so you carried on, you and your wife, working at that one?
Yes, sir.
And how long did you carry on working at the Harold Park one?
Another 1 year or so, because then they said that the post offices are shutting down post offices because Harold Park was not a very busy post office, and plus we had lost businesses by that time, so they decided to shut it.
Okay, and so the closure of Harold Park wasn't anything to do with allegations against you so far as you knew?
No, sir.
Okay, that was just a normal course of business?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of the impacts that the closure of 99 Kings Road had on you, you say in your statement that you had invested at nearly £150,000 to lease the property and the shop, plus thousands of pounds more on stock levels and setting up the shop. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And did that include improvements to the shop?
Yes, sir.
And you've told us already that you had a 14-year lease.
Yes, sir.
And did you have to surrender that lease?
Yes, sir.
And what was your salary at the Kings Road Post Office?
35,000 per annum.
And did you lose that salary?
Addition to the shop takings also.
And what were roughly the shop takings?
We were doing about 50,000 per annum.
And was that takings or profit?
Well, you could say 20% profit at the most. And we also had a flat on the top, which we had let out. So we lost that flat's income also on the top of Kings Road Post Office.
And what were your intentions if this hadn't happened in terms of hanging on to 99 Kings Road?
Then we would have run it. And after 14 years, God willing, me and my wife would be well and happy. We would have had enough savings for our old age, and plus we would be able to educate our children, everything. So, because both children went to university and we couldn't help them in any way. They were working and studying at the university. We feel so let down. We think like as parents, we are a failure to our children because we could not do anything to help them in any way. They helped themselves, and today by God's grace, they got very good jobs in the leading banks, and we are grateful to God. But we lost utterly everything. This was to the post office.
And so if this hadn't have happened, it would have been your intention to carry on running the post office until retirement?
Yes, sir.
And you would have used the income to help provide for your children as they pass through education?
Yes, sir.
And so by the last answers you've given the chair, are you referring to the broader financial impact that this has on families as well as those directly affected by it?
Yes, sir. We had to go into IVA, and we were on the verge of bankruptcy, of losing everything we had worked for the last 20, 25 years.
And so when did you go into an IVA?
Within 1 year, we went into IVA, sir.
So within a year of the end of 2012?
No,
So 2002 rather?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was the effect of entering an IVA in terms of your ability to get work?
Well, it affected in lots of ways. Number one, I could not open a bank account for 6 years. I could not get a loan. My son had applied for a job in the bank. That was his first job. And he was worried because if they did a credit search, he would not get that job, thinking that his parents are thieves, because our report would be on the credit report saying that these people have been shut, the post office has been shut down because of them stealing the money from the post office.
What did you do in terms of getting work?
To tell the truth, I was so much down and out that at one stage I was thinking of contemplating suicide. But then I thought, no, this is the easy way out. What about my family, my children? No, I'm going to do something. I can't fight the post office because I went to a barrister in London. He charged me £500 and he said to me, Mr. Sethi, if I were you, you're just wasting your time because the post office contract is so heavily waived in favor of the post office, you cannot win. You cannot win. So my advice to you was, I have to charge you money because you have come to me, but for you is to go and find another job. Now I was nearly 54 at that time. And at 54, who's going to give you a job? Because wherever I went and said if I wanted to go back into banking, they didn't want to say you're too old. They would just say, sorry, you got too much experience and we don't have that kind of vacancy. So in the end, I got into security where I got minimum wage.
And so you're a security guard.
Yes, and I was doing night shift, which I had never done in my life. So I had, once again, no time with the children because during night time I was away doing my shift because I used to do a 12-hour shift, sometimes even more because you are being paid hourly. The more work you do, the more money you can get. But, with minimum wage, it doesn't matter how many hours you put in. There's not much return at the end of the day.
Now, in your answer before last, you said you went off to see a barrister. Was that a direct access barrister in 2004?
One of my friends, he said to me that the best thing is we should go to a barrister because they're going to terminate your contract, and let's see what he says.
And was that in 2004?
Much earlier, sir, because by the time they had closed the post office, so I was seeking if I could do anything to redress the situation.
What, if any, impact did this have on your reputation within the community? I.e., what happened to you?
Our reputation was in shreds. People who used to hold us in high esteem thought we were thieves. We had been robbing from the post office. People who used to stop us in the street to say hello turned their face the other way, thinking these people run a post office, and look, the post office has shut them down because they've been robbing from the post office. And we had no way to prove it or tell anybody that this is wrong. We tried our best. I did highlight, there's a cutting also of the newspaper.
Which we're just coming to.
Okay. It had a very bad impact on us in every aspect of life, psychologically, financially, reputation-wise. The community who loved us didn't want to know us.
You mentioned that you gave an interview to a newspaper. Was that a local newspaper?
Yes, sir. Because I had a post office in Brentwood, I asked the local newspaper if they would like to come down and let me give my side of the story. And they said yes. And they came to interview me and they published my interview in Brentwood Gazette.
And so I think we've got the article from the Brentford Gazette. I think that can be displayed. Whilst that's being done, Mr. Sethi, if you look at your witness statement, at the end of the first one, there is a copy of that article. Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
And is this the article you're referring to?
Yes, sir. And in this, I highlighted at that time, not now, that the fault lies not with us, it lies with the Horizon system, which the post office has refused to come on numerous occasions when they've been told. So I highlighted at that time saying there's a problem in the Horizon system. But we were told, you're the only post office in the country who's got a problem. Nobody else has that.
Okay, there's a lot packed into those answers there. Let's just take it in stages.
Sorry, sir.
No, that's all right. That's all right. So I think we've dated this at about spring 2012. Is that about right? So 2002. I keep saying 2012.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And it's in the Brentford Gazette.
Yes, sir.
And you can see the heading, Post Chiefs tell shopkeeper he must advertise to replace wife. That's what you told us about before lunch. They wanted you to put up an advert in the shop for a replacement position to the one that your wife occupied.
Yes, sir.
In the post office.
Yes, sir.
And if we look at it together, it reads, a Brentwood shopkeeper has been faced with an impossible dilemma after postal chiefs asked him to advertise for a replacement for his wife. Anjana Sethi, sub-post office mistress at Kings Road Post Office, has been told her contract will be terminated in June due to a dispute over alleged cash and business statement irregularities. Her husband Baljit runs the shop where the post office is based and is fighting the decision, claiming the problem is due to a faulty computer system installed by Post Office Limited. Is that what you were just referring to, that paragraph there?
Yes, sir.
And you were saying it's not just me saying in 2021 that it was the fault was with Horizon. I was saying that in 2002 and saying it publicly.
Yes, sir. I highlighted at that stage. It was not that I highlighted in 2012 or when the post office. I highlighted as soon as my post office was running into problems. I highlighted that the fault lies not with us, but what they put the system. The fault lies with the system, sir.
And we can see, if you look at the third column in the first paragraph, so third column, first paragraph, there's a further reference to that. Mr. Sethi argues the system is faulty, but Post Office has totally refuted this and claims it has sent experts down to check it twice.
This is not true, sir. They never sent anybody ever to check it. If they're saying they sent people twice, how come they didn't send the people when it was shortage? They didn't send anybody when it was short. They didn't send anybody when it was surplus. This is a false statement. I'm sorry to say the post office whom we love has been telling lies and lies and lies. There's no truth in this statement, sir.
Did this newspaper article have any effect on how people viewed you in the local community? You said you wanted to get your side of the story across.
So at the end of the day, the thing is this, newspapers are going to publish both sides of the stories. They will publish what you say, but how you can convince the people is another matter. Because by printing it in the newspaper is nothing. People are still not going to believe you. They'll just say that he was trying to prove his innocence when he has been a crook all the time. So with the community, it is very difficult. You say anything you do wrong, it spreads like wildfire. And it's very difficult to convince. You can't convince every individual, go around and telling them, I've done nothing wrong, sir. So virtually, to tell you the truth, I only highlighted what I could do, and that was the only reason. I even actually went to a tribunal to put my case forward. But the tribunal said to me, sorry, Mr. Sethi, you are not an employee of the post office. You are an agent, and we do not deal in a tribunal with agents.
In terms of the reputational harm that this caused you, you've spoken about people in the local community. What about friends and family?
It was the same case because we stopped going out because wherever we went, there was always a talk about the post office, directly or indirectly. And this affected us so badly that me and my wife decided we shall not be going for any parties or anywhere because we have not done anything wrong. We didn't want to hide from the people. But people still are not going to believe your words because they're going to believe what the post office says. You cannot convince everybody. Maybe 1-2 people might have agreed with you, but at the end of the day, there was nothing we could do to prove that we had done nothing wrong.
You told us about the financial impact that this had on you, the broader consequences of that financial impact, the impact on your health and how you felt, on the harm it did to you in the community and amongst friends and family. Did there come a time when you went to a mediation?
Yes, and I can't remember the year, but we did go in 2012 or something, or 2014, I don't know the exact
In your
date.
statement, you picked the middle year, you said approximately 2013 in your statement.
I'm sorry, because it's been such a long time, and we went there. We had actually given up all hope. And we threw, I'm a very person who keeps all the records, but my wife said to me, look, your cupboard is full of this rubbish, Nothing is going to happen, we are going to get. Why don't you chuck it away? So I had to throw away everything. When we went for this mediation, they offered me a paltry sum of £1,000. I said to them, are you joking? £1,000 for the last 15 years of the scandalous thing we have gone through. Our lives have been turned upside down. Our children have suffered. We have suffered. You know, both me and my wife are diabetic. I'm actually on insulin. We did not, it's not hereditary. We never had any sickness. We never took a single day off closing the post office ever. In all this 25 or 30 years we ran the post office, we never rang up the post office saying, oh, today my wife is sick, she can't run the post office, I can't. Because we were more worried about the community. We used to think we are providing a service and people are going to like you for that, for doing. Like I said to you, I used to open 7 days a week in Brentwood. In Herald Park, I never used to open the post office at 9 o'clock. I used to open at 8:30 because I used to see snow is falling. People are standing outside. I said, no, please come in. Don't stand outside. Come inside, stand here, but come in a queue as you all have lined up. But please don't stand outside because we used to open it early so that people could. There were people who couldn't, there were people who used to like come to take money, say like you want to withdraw £2,000. And a lady used to walk up to us and say to me, Mr. Sethi, you know, that I feel a bit uneasy because there's a man standing there, I think he looks dubious to me. Can I leave my book with you? I've got 10 weeks pension money there. Can you please drop it to me after you close the post office? And this is what I'm telling you, heart on my hand, you won't believe it. I said to her, I will bring it after 5:30 because I closed the post office at 5:30. And it was raining cats and dogs. And my wife said, where are you going? I said, you know, my customer, she's left £500 with me. If I don't go at 5:30, she might get a heart attack thinking I have run away with the money. So I said, no, I got drenched. And she said to me, you could have waited. I said, no, that's not the question. The question is you trust me. And if I didn't come, I was worried more about you than myself. So this is how we worked with the community, and that's why the community loved us, because we cared for the community. If we saw somebody standing at a bus stop, we used to give them a lift. We didn't just drive past. We used to say, no, let's give a lift. And we say, oh, I live across the road. I said, that doesn't matter. This will take me only a minute. So we did everything to get post office the business. I went to different pubs, garages, where they started banking with me, who were not even near me where I had my post office. But because I gave them very good service, they came and banked with me. We used to get deposits of £100,000 a week.
Just going back to the mediation, they said that they offered
£1,000.
And did you settle in the end for a different amount?
Yes, in the end they told me, look, we have wasted enough time. We'll give you 5,000, that is our final offer. You want to take it or leave it. Then I talked to my wife, I said to her, look, you're not getting anything. If you don't take this 5,000, we won't even get that. So we might as well take that 5,000, because at the end of the day, if you don't accept that 5,000, we are going to get nothing.
Did it represent the actual losses that you had suffered?
No, sir. It was nowhere near the actual losses.
More recently, have you made an application to the Post Office's historic shortfall scheme?
Yes, sir. I made a to this historical shortfall, which I wish to highlight if if you give me an opportunity. Can I say something about this historical shortfall?
Let's just take it in stages.
Let Mr. Beer ask the
Yes.
questions. I'm sure he's going to get to the relevant
Okay,
part
sir.
for you. Mr.
Yes, I have applied for a historical
Okay, so
shortfall.
under the HSS, as we're calling it.
Yes, sir.
And when did you make the application?
About 2 years back, sir, in February 2020.
February 2020.
Yes, sir.
When did you receive a reply of substance from the Post Office?
Unfortunately, sir, I have not received a single substantial reply. Every 3 months, I write to my MP, she writes to the post office, and they come with a stereotype statement. Mr. and Mrs. Sethi, we got 2,500 applications, so you're not the only one. Please have patience, and we will come back to you. This is the only reply I have received in the last 2 years. But just last Thursday, after sitting on that for 2 years, now they have come back to me saying we want you to answer these 100 questions. I mean, I've suffered for 20 years. I need help from my children. I'm nearing 70. I might not live long. I asked my children to help me. They got their own lives. They got their own children. Now they want me to fill 100 questions to answer. Do you think this is fair, sir?
So just getting back to the chronology then, you have had holding replies every 3 months or so for the last 2 years.
Yes, sir.
And then on the 10th of February,
Yes, sir.
you received a letter which I think has actually got 68 questions in it, but if you count the sub-questions,
Yes, sir.
it comes out to over 100. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And is that the first time they have asked you for that information?
Yes, sir. But before that, whatever information when we put in for historical shortfall, they have asked me so many questions which we have answered. And they keep repeating the same questions because last time I wrote to them and I said, you know, these questions which you have asked me now again after 6 months, I already sent you this 6 months back. And then they came back to me saying, oh, sorry, there are lots of people dealing with this. So that person who was dealing has mislaid it. The case has come to me new. So I need no reply from you. I mean, this is like passing the buck from you to him, him to her, which will be never ending. Even if I answer these 100 questions tomorrow, some bright geezer might get up tomorrow and say, oh, Mr. Sethi, you know what? Now people have changed. Could you please answer those 100 questions again?
Looking at the questions generally, I'm not going to go through them. Are you in a position now, 20 years on, to answer lots of them?
Not really, sir, because the questions they are asking me, when you bought the post office, will they know it? These are some of the typical questions. How much you invested? When you bought it? How much was the surplus? How much was the shortage? I mean, all this information is held by the post office. They are just wasting time just to prolong the things. And if this goes on, I think I'll be dead and gone and we'll never get anything from the post office.
You say in your statement that you are deeply worried that you or your wife will die before you achieve any form of justice or meaningful compensation. Is that the case?
Yes, sir.
So what do you want from the post office?
I want 2, 3 things from the post office. Number one, we want an apology from the post office saying they're sorry what they have done to us. We have not haven't received a single letter till today saying they were wrong, they apologize, they are sorry. They haven't done that. The impact that they had on us. The people who did this, they should be investigated. Not a single person has been brought to charge till today. They have gone scot-free and their answer would be, sorry, they have left the organization or they retired. Yeah, but they are the people who did it. And this was not one person. This goes right till the top. So I can't say, oh, my manager did it or my sub-manager did it. I'm sorry, right up to the chief executive or the director of the post office, everybody knew what exactly was happening. So I want that to be done. Thirdly, no amount of compensation can return us the 20 years of hell we have gone through. Only my wife and I know it. How we have struggled in these 20 years. We have worked so many hours for a petty amount of money. But we didn't want handouts. We didn't go to the state to give us unemployment benefit or anything. We said, no, we will make a life, we'll work hard. As I said earlier, the post office took her again and made her a manager, which really shows that in one place you're saying she's dishonest, another place you're again making her a manager of a post office. How can you justify this? So I want a good compensation, not only for me, but for my colleagues. There are people who are worse off than me, who suffered. They went to prison. I must say, I consider myself lucky that I didn't go because mine turned to a surplus. What if it would have not turned to a surplus? My wife would have to go to prison, not me, because she was a sub-postmistress. They would have charged her. And who would have looked after my children? Our family would have been broken. Children would have not been educated. They wouldn't be what they are today. I'm so proud today of my children. I can hold my head up and say they worked so hard. And I'm such a proud, we are so proud parents of our children. they've helped us in every aspect. So we helping them. So I hope that the post office looks into this and gives us our due, which should have been done long time back. I don't want them to keep postponing and saying it'll happen in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, down the year. No, give us something now so that we have something. We want to get something now. Some compensation should be given now, and then they can decide about other things later on. But all they do is, sorry, Mr. Sethi, there are 2,500 people. Yes, I know there are 2,500 people. You say in the papers, I've been reading, this is what Mr. Scully said. He said 98% of the postmasters have got the money. Then another place, they said, no, 95% have got. Another place, they said 33%. So where am I? I'm nowhere in those 98% or 95% or 33%. You're not giving an exact figure. What we want you is to come out and tell us that we have got this, we are doing this. They're doing exactly what they did when they closed me down. They believe that if we don't answer, that is the end of the story. That's what they did when we were running shortage. They never came back. And now when we applied for the historical shortfall, they're doing exactly the same story. They just think that, well, I also wanted to ask you, sir, if tomorrow me and my wife pass away, will my children be able to get some compensation, or will the matter just die along as if we die?
Mr. Sethi, thank you very much for the evidence that you've given.
Thank you, sir.
I haven't got any other questions for you. Is there anything else that you feel that you want to say that we haven't, through this process of question and answers, covered?
No, sir, I've said everything. I hope now that me and my family gets justice, which is overdue to us and to other sub-postmasters and my colleagues. God willing, I hope that will happen. Thank you very much, sir. And I'm so really very grateful to you for giving me an opportunity to put my case. That's the first time in 20 years, everything has been blocking up. And today I feel that most of it has come out. And I feel a bit relaxed, and I'm happy, and I'm grateful to you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you very much. And also thank you, Mrs. Sethi, not just for supporting your husband with your statement, but for coming to sit by him and supporting him today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sethi. If you return to your seats now, we'll move on to the next witness. Thank you indeed.
Mr. Beer, while the preparations are going on, if you think there's a need for a break during the course of Mrs. Hamilton's evidence, you just take that break.
Thank you, sir. Yes, although she won't like being called by this name, Josephine Hamilton, please.
Go, Joe. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hamilton, do take a seat. And thank you for bringing your own Bible. Can you give us your full name, please?
Josephine Hamilton. You've done it again.
In front of you, there should be two witness statements. I should have said I ask questions on behalf of the chair of the inquiry, Sir Wim Williams. My name's Jason Beer. There should be two witness statements in front of you. The first is dated the 13th of January. And if you look at the last page of that, which is page 21, there should be a signature. Is that your signature?
My signature. Oh, yes, there, sorry.
And when you made that statement, were the contents of it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Then if you look at the second statement, please, which should be dated the 10th of February 2022, on the last page, which is page 4, there is a further signature. Is that your signature?
Yes.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
Now, Mrs. Hamilton, can you tell us how old you are now?
64.
Thank you. And before you took over running the post office in South Warnborough in October 2001, we read from your statements, you worked in a range of jobs, I think.
Yes. I followed my husband's career.
Okay. By my reckoning, looking at all the sources available to me, I've seen that before you took over the post office, you worked as an army, or in army personnel research,
Yeah.
as a care assistant.
Yeah.
You ran a pub. You ran a haulage business. You drove a tipper truck.
Yeah.
Having got an HGV license, you were a long-distance lorry driver.
Yeah.
So those 6 jobs preceded your work in the post office.
Yes.
And so how did it come about that you took over the post office in South Warnborough?
Well, we were struggling to make haulage pay because the cost of fuel was such a lot of money. And so somebody in the village, because we'd been there for 15 years before that, somebody suggested that I took over the village shop because it had been run by volunteers and it needed someone to kind of bring it together. So they said, why don't you take over the lease on the shop? And yeah, it had a post office in it and there was somebody working in the post office. So I took a 40-year lease on the business.
40.
40, yeah.
So can you just describe the post office? I've called it South Warnborough. Whereabouts is that?
It's in Hampshire, between Odium and Alton, and it's a quintessentially Hampshire village. It's a lovely little shop, and it was just a local community store really, with a post office in the back of it.
So it was run as a cooperative or a local
Yeah,
community
yeah.
with a post office inside it.
Yes, yeah.
And people were concerned that if the shop closed, the post office would close.
Yeah, the post office was really important because at that time we had lots of elderly people in the village who really needed it.
Did you have to pay any money to take over the 40-year lease?
Well, they said they knew I didn't have a lot of money, so they said if you take it on, you can pay us rent every year plus lease premium. So I was buying it over the term of the lease.
And so the they in that, is that the landlord rather than the
Yeah,
post
that's
office?
the village shop association. They owned it, or everyone had debentures in it.
And so I think you say in your statement the price of the lease was £36,000.
Yeah.
You didn't have capital to pay it up front.
No.
And so you were planning to clear it as you went along.
Yes.
Expecting to clear it
Yeah.
eventually.
Well, the plan was to clear it in about 5 years, but it didn't pan out like that because of the post office.
And were you lent some money to purchase the shop's
Yeah.
standing stock?
Yeah, I was lent £10,000 to buy the stock.
And what happened when you, in October 2001, took over the shop and the post office?
Well, it was just a bare shell, really, and we realised that the road was really useful, and we kind of turned it in. We realised that with fresh produce and a coffee machine, you could actually turn it into a bit of a cafe, a takeaway on the way through to work. We captured lots of builders because we were open at 7 a.m, and that kind of started to grow the business, really. And then the lady who was running the post office, she decided she wanted to leave at Christmas that year. And so...
This is still 2001?
This is till 2001, yes. And the sub-postmaster, who is sub-postmaster in name only, he approached me and said, would you consider running it? So I thought, well, back in the day, it was a tiny little post office. It was all paper-based. Although it had the Horizon system, everything, there was no chip and pin. So it was easy to balance, easy to work. It was just checking cash, and that was it.
So when did you take over as manager of the post office then?
Christmas 2001. She left Christmas Eve, and I started in between Christmas and New Year.
And when did you officially become the sub-postmistress?
Eventually, in 2003, the sub-postmaster was terminally ill, and they asked me if we had to apply for the position, but nobody else came forward. So I went and was interviewed in Basingstoke, and I got the job and took it over as sub-postmistress.
And when you took over, or when you joined in October 2001, then when you were manager in December 2001, and then by the time you took over as the sub-postmistress in 2003, were you aware of any issues with the accounts or balances of the post office?
I knew they'd had a £270 discrepancy,
Yes.
And I knew that the sub-postmaster had paid it, but I just, it was before my time, before I even took the shop over. I knew that I'd heard that Sue had had a problem with the £270, so I didn't really give it another thought.
And was there any discussion over what had caused the discrepancy?
No.
And when you joined in October 2001, what were the systems that were in place?
We had like the basic Horizon system, but because you could match everything at the end of the day, it was like double entry bookkeeping. You could see little piles of paper with the pension dockets and things like that. If you'd made a mistake and finished something to check or cash, and you'd finished it to cash and it should have been check, you could see, because you had a pile of checks and a pile of bits and pieces that you could add up and see straight away where you'd made a mistake. So it was easy.
So were you running parallel systems then?
Well, it was just at the end of the day, if there was ever anything wrong, you could spread everything out and have a look, and it would be there. And so you could sort it out.
You mentioned the introduction of chip and pin. When did that come in your branch?
It came in late 2003. I can't remember exactly when, but it was just about around the time I became sub-postmaster. And it all went haywire from then on.
Did you receive any training for the introduction of the chip and pin system?
No, they literally screwed it onto the counter. A Fujitsu guy came, screwed it onto the counter, and I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, that's chip and pin." And he said, it'll be going live in a little while, and that was it. That was the training.
Did you receive any training in the wider Horizon system?
No. I'd had 4 half-days training between Christmas and New Year when I took it over,
Yes.
when it was paper-based, but the chip and pin hadn't been invented then, so nothing related to it.
You describe in your statement between 25th of December 2001 and the 1st of January 2002, you were visited by a trainer from the post office.
Yes.
There were very few customers in the post office.
There were no customers.
And the trainer therefore gave you limited training. What was that training about?
It was about basically what envelopes to put what in at the end of the day and what to dispatch to where. He did a pretend balance, and I mean, we didn't have any figures to play with because the post office wasn't busy between Christmas and New Year. So he basically pinned everything on the wall because there actually wasn't a balance between Christmas and New Year. He pretended to do one, showed me what would be done, and then left me to it.
You said that when chip and pin was installed, everything started to go haywire.
Yeah, I mean, you just couldn't. If you had once discrepancies started happening, you couldn't actually find out what had gone wrong.
You say in your statement that this is when I started to experience significant unexplained shortfalls.
Yes.
The first discrepancy occurred on the 2nd of December 2003, when a shortfall showed up in the sum of £2,082. which the post office had put into the suspense account.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Was that almost immediately after the chip and pin was installed?
Yeah, it was within a month or so. I can't be exactly sure what date, but it was around that time.
What was the suspense account, so far as you knew?
Or something, if you had something wrong, it would just be parked over there. But it was when I went to bring it out of suspense that the whole thing went, it doubled in front of my eyes. They told me what to do, and the discrepancy doubled. And I demanded that, well, they said, you've got to make it good. And I said, well, I'm not accepting that. I said, I want the area manager to come down. And he came down and
To slow it down a little bit, if we may.
Yeah.
So you've got this discrepancy that showed up on the 2nd of December 2003 of £2,082. You said you contacted them. Who did you contact?
The help desk.
And so did you phone the help desk, the helpline?
Yes, I phoned the helpline.
And you said, I think, that you wanted to know how to take that money out of the suspense account.
Yes, because they I can't remember that process, but you kind of take the suspense account out to zero. When they find out what's wrong, they take it out and it becomes zero. And whatever I did made it minus 4,000, not 2,000.
So were you given some?
The 2,000.
Were you given some instructions by the
Yes.
helpline, and did you
Yeah.
carry those out?
Yeah, I carried them out on the 31st of December, I think it was.
In your statement, you say the 24th of December.
24th of December.
So
yes.
Christmas Eve
Yeah.
rather than New Year's
Yeah.
Eve. And it doubled to about £4,188.53, you say,
Yeah,
in your statement. Did you speak to the help desk again?
yeah, yeah. Well,
What did they say?
Well, I ranted for about a week, trying to get it sorted out, because they just kept saying, well, you've got to make it good. And it's like, well, I didn't owe 2,000, let alone 4,000. So I said, well, I want the area manager to come down. So they knew about the amount and allowed me to keep rolling it over. And the area manager came down sometime in January, and he couldn't find it either. But he said, oh, I think an error notice will be generated, because I can't work out what's going on either. And the error notice never came. So they said, we managed to get it down to about 3,100 and something. And they sent me a letter saying, we'd like you to send that by return of post. And it's like, well, I don't have that. And so they said, well, that's fine, we'll keep your remuneration until it's paid for.
Now, you mentioned about somebody from Fujitsu, I think, coming out to install the chip and pin system.
Yeah.
Did anyone come out from Fujitsu after this complaint was made by you in December
Yeah.
2003?
I'd had a couple of times engineers had come out and changed the base unit under the counter, and they said, oh, we're just changing that because it's not recording properly at the other end. And I mean, honestly, you might think I'm a real dummy, but I never thought that there was anything wrong, really. I just thought, oh, well, it's not recording, so that they're on top of it and they've changed the base unit.
And so you thought that solved whatever problem there was?
Yeah, because you couldn't actually see what was happening the other end, so you didn't know really what they were talking about.
And so these shortfalls were being carried over, I think you said?
Yeah. And eventually they kept my wages, and then another shortfall came of 750, and that was the same answer from the help desk. Well, you've got to make it good, and they kept my wages for that. And then there was another smaller one which I made good, and they said, any more of these and you're sacked. So that's when I didn't report. I borrowed money and I remortgaged, and I put more money in to try and level it up, and in the end I just ran out of money. And
so you were saying that you put some money in yourself.
Yeah.
They deducted some of your wages.
They were deducting two lots of wages, one straight after the other. And then it kept going wrong, and I kept having deficits. And so I remortgaged the house because I had a £9,000 one, and I put £9,000 in the safe to make that up. And then I borrowed £3,000 from a friend, and I put that in. And I just gave up because and that's when I didn't flag up that there was money, that the accounts didn't balance. Because it would come up with a figure that you should have in your safe, and if you didn't have it. Well, you couldn't actually open the next day unless you agreed the figure, and it would generate the figure. So you just go, yeah, I've got that, because I didn't know where else to go, because I'd already tried to get them to come and sort it out, but they didn't.
So the system was showing deficits.
Yeah,
You were seeking to make those deficits up from your own private money and the money of others
yeah,
by putting cash in the safe.
in the safe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you knew that you hadn't taken any money.
I know, and I just backed myself into a corner. I didn't know where else to go, because I knew I couldn't get any help from the post office. And they, every time you said this isn't right, they just said, well, you've got to pay it.
Now, I think things came to a head at the beginning of 2006.
Yeah,
And you say in your statement that by that time you were becoming very worried and stressed about
Yeah.
the continuous shortfalls and discrepancies on horizon.
yeah. Well, I'd had chest pains, and I went to the doctor, and they gave me an ECG, but they thought it was just stress. And well, that period, that last year, when the amount was growing and growing, and I just didn't know. I didn't know where to go for help, and they rang and said, we want you to remit £25,000 tomorrow because we're concerned about the amount of cash you're holding. And I knew I didn't have it. And a friend came past and saw the light on about 10 o'clock at night, and she came in, and it was the friend that lent me the money, and she said, whatever's the matter? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Where can I find 25 grand? She said, you've just got to stop this, because this is, she said, you're going to be really ill if you've got to, whatever happens, you've got to draw a line under it. So she said, you're going to phone the Federation in the morning and ask for help. And so
Did you phone the Federation? And
Yeah.
by the Federation you mean
The
the
Federation
National Federation of Sub-Postmasters?
Yeah, yeah. And I phoned them in the morning, and I said, I've got a big discrepancy in my office. I said, I've got no idea how it's happened. I've had problems with the computer system. I've been putting money in. And she said, well, you go find yourself a good criminal lawyer and we'll arrange an audit. And that was the sum total of their help.
Did you go and find yourself a good criminal lawyer?
Well, fortunately, one of my customers was a criminal lawyer, and she lived right opposite the shop. So I went and literally poured my heart out to her, and I don't think she could really quite believe what was going on, because she knew me.
You told us that you went to see your GP.
Yeah,
Did your GP sign you off from work?
yeah.
For how long?
They signed me off for a month with stress, but I couldn't take any time off because the shop, I was the shop. There was me and one or two part-time others, and I could not be there.
So even though you were signed off, you carried on working?
Yeah.
You said that an audit was going to be arranged by the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters.
Yeah, they arranged it for I rang them on the Monday evening, and they came Wednesday morning.
And how many auditors arrived?
There were two that came round to my house, and I think they left one in the office as well while they were around at my house.
And what did the auditors say as a result of the audit?
Well, they said, there's a large discrepancy in your office. What have you done with it? What have you done with the money? And I said, I don't even know. I don't know what's going on. I said, I cannot get to grips with the computer system. And I said, I've absolutely no idea. And he said, well, you're the only one that's ever had problems with Horizon. And at the time, I believed him because we didn't know.
So they told you that you were the only person that had had problems
It ever
with Horizon?
happened to, yeah. And I really did think I was going mental. I just, because, I'm not that unintelligent. If I put everything out there, you should have been able to find it. I couldn't get them to help me find it, and it was just crazy. I used to literally sit there like a mad woman at night with paperwork everywhere, all over the floor, just thinking, well, it's got to be here, but it wasn't. I couldn't find it because they had all the information the other end. I only had a screen, and they wouldn't give it to you.
You said that in your statement, I began to feel like I was going mad and that it was entirely my fault.
Yeah,
Is that how you felt?
yeah, that's how I felt. And when he said I was the only one, that's how I did feel. I mean, it really, I thought, oh God, I must be, I just thought it was me.
And did you operate under that mistaken belief that you were the only one that had problems with Horizon
Yeah.
until the media coverage came about in February 2008?
Yeah. I mean, when I actually got sentenced, it was almost like, although you don't want yourself in the national papers as being a thief, actually people started phoning me, and it's like, I know someone this happened to. I know someone this happened to, and it's like, oh my God, it's, I'm not the only one. And it wasn't until that then the penny started to drop, and then we started to, because I mean, back then, I didn't really use the internet that much, and a group of villagers who'd been in court with me, they literally started trawling the internet, and we found all these other people.
And Ms.
all over the
Hamilton, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, sorry.
At the moment, we're dealing with the visit of the auditors in early 2006, and them telling you that you were the only person that had experienced problems with Horizon. I think you were suspended, is that right?
Yeah, they suspended me at that point.
And we've got a date of 9th of March 2006.
Yeah.
You say in your statement that the investigators also started looking around the room as if to value your items.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It was, and my mum, bless her, she was standing at the door, and I can see her now. She stood there and she said, "This is my house too, because we owned the house jointly." And she said, "This is my house." And they stopped then. They kind of backed off, and they basically finished up and left. I mean, thank goodness, because if it hadn't been owned by my parents as well, I'd have ended up down the route that a lot of others have ended up.
And when you went back to the post office, what did you find had happened in the post office?
Well, they'd taken everything away. Obviously, I couldn't get into, but they'd taken all the keys, so I couldn't get into the safe or anything like that. And they'd pretty much, I was locked out of my own post office.
Had they taken away the paperwork?
Yeah, they'd taken the paperwork away.
You mentioned in your statement, however, that £500 worth of vehicle tax stamps and a pile of commemorative stamps had been left behind.
Yeah, we found them up on a shelf later on. They just left them up on a shelf. And they'd been in the safe, so...
Were you allowed to go back into the post office after that?
I had to go into there to lock the door, but it wasn't a post office. And when there was an alarm in there, so I had to set that. But the new sub-postmaster from Hook, he came in and took it over temporarily. So I kept it running. He came the following week.
And I think the next month, I think on the 12th of April, you received a letter from the post office asking you to attend for an interview. Is that right?
Yes.
And by that time, you had spoken with, instructed the criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
And they prepared with you a written statement.
Yes. Yeah.
And did you read that statement out?
No, the lawyer read it out.
And did you answer questions or
No
no comment?
Yeah, no comment for 2 tapes. That was horrible.
How did you feel when you were being interviewed?
Awful. I couldn't look at him. I kept looking at the desk, and he kept poking stuff underneath so I could read it. And so, "Is this your bank statement? Is this your bank statement? What have you done with this? Where is it? And it was just awful.
Did you subsequently receive a letter on the 23rd of May saying that the post office was considering terminating your contract?
Yes.
And on the 6th of June, did you receive a letter from the post office saying that the audit had revealed a shortfall in the sum of £36,600 odd pounds?
Yes.
Was a breakdown given for that sum or
No.
not? On the 16th of June 2006 was your contract with the post office terminated.
Yeah.
Did you then receive a summons to appear before a criminal court?
Yes.
And was that for a single count of theft
Yeah.
for the
For the
36,000?
36,600 and something. Yeah.
Did you then attend firstly Aldershot Magistrates Court?
Yeah.
And did you plead not guilty to the charge of theft?
Yeah.
was your case sent up to the Crown Court at Winchester?
Yeah,
And did you attend on 3 occasions?
yeah.
In,
Pleaded not guilty the first time, and then as we got closer to the trial, they did the plea bargain.
and tell us about the plea bargain. How did that come about?
Well, they said if you plead guilty to false accounting, to 14...
Sorry, the they there, is that your solicitor or is that the
Post
Post
Office.
Office? Okay.
Yeah, Post Office said, offered a plea bargain. If you plead guilty to 14 counts of false accounting, don't mention Horizon on sentencing and repay all the money, we'll drop the theft. And my lawyer, I can remember her opening a file and saying, did you know the money wasn't there when you said it was? I mean, basically, you had to say it was to be able to serve customers the next day, and you just said, yeah. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, they're going to get you for false accounting, so you better just plead guilty, because then you're less likely to go to prison. So prison absolutely terrified me, so I would have almost said yes to anything. So I pleaded guilty.
So did you do those 3 things, plead guilty,
14 times.
14 counts of false accounting?
Yeah. Yeah, they made me stand. It took about half an hour to read it all out, because they read out every day. You said 14 times. It was just, I just had to say it 14 times that I was guilty. And it just felt like it was just rubbing my nose in it.
When you said that you were guilty, did you in fact know that you'd done nothing wrong?
Yeah, I knew I'd done nothing wrong, but I couldn't explain it. And I kind of felt guilty because I thought I actually did say the money was there when it wasn't. Because every time I'd said it isn't, they'd taken the money off me and threatened me with a sack. So I actually felt a little bit guilty as well. So
Even now you say that you still feel guilty?
yeah, because I kind of lied. Not for any other reason than I didn't know what to do.
You came up for sentencing before the judge on the 4th of February 2008.
Yeah,
Did you think you were going to go to prison?
yeah, I had my bag packed. I went for my pre-sentence report, and she said, you're 75% likely to go to prison for this. And I'd been told, I probably wouldn't go to prison, but I didn't realise the odds were 75%. It was just, and I'd been told to look remorseful, and I sat there and thought, and I said 75%, and she said, yeah, you better take your bag packed. You've got to prepare your shop to be without you. Make sure it runs, because you will be unemployable if you go to prison. And she said, this is a really serious offence. And I said, I know. So I looked kind of sad. Well, I was sad. I was terrified, actually.
And so you packed a bag,
Yeah.
just in case.
I didn't come home, and I hugged my mum and dad goodbye, and and my husband and my boys.
Now, one of the things that you'd agreed to do was to raise the £36,000
Yeah,
and pay it back.
yeah, yeah,
Back, in inverted
Back.
commas.
yeah.
How did you raise that?
Well, we remortgaged, but because I'd already remortgaged to shovel money into the post office, I could only get 30,000. So we had to have a village meeting, and I literally had to stand up in front of everybody and tell them what had happened.
So at the 36, you remortgaged again and got 30.
I remortgaged again and got 30, but I was £6,000 or 6,600 short. And Izzy, my lawyer, she came along. We had a village meeting in the village hall, and I had to tell everybody that I was £6,000 short. And although I hadn't done anything wrong, I was short. So literally, people dropped money through a letterbox and cheques, and the money was made up. So when I went to court, we had the money to pay them.
And so there was essentially a village whip round.
Yeah, yeah. Said that in one of the papers. Village whip round stays fallen sub postmistress.
I've read the article.
It was just incredible how good they were, and they all turned up in court to support me.
Over 70, I think, 74. You said in your
74,
witness.
and the vicar stood up in the witness box and said how lovely I was. And it was like, I mean, honestly, I can laugh about it now, but at the time, it was just awful. I was so frightened.
Did the appearance of the village, including the vicar, have an effect on the sentence, or so it seemed?
I'm quite sure it did, because I know, like, all over there, we a lot of us have been up for the same thing, and other people went to prison and I didn't. So I think it saved me.
You were given a suspended sentence order.
I was given a supervision
Sorry,
order.
supervision order, my mistake. And that involved
Going to the
attending weekly
probation
meetings.
Yeah.
And that eventually went down to fortnightly and then monthly meetings
Yeah.
with a probation officer.
Yeah.
And then after a while, 6 or 7 months, I think you
They
didn't
said
have to
I'd-
attend anymore.
No, because I was behaving myself.
And you had to pay costs in the sum of £1,000, I think.
Yeah.
Can you remember what was said to the judge about why you had committed these offences?
Well, I mean, she said they kind of made out that I was sorry for what I'd done, and I'd got a bit confused, and I a lot of it on the day was a bit of a blur, but they said I'd got confused and made mistakes, and but I was really sorry.
Underneath it, you knew that you had
Okay.
taken no money.
Yeah, because I always went not guilty to theft, and I hadn't taken any money, and I just couldn't explain it, because it always sounded like there was a big pot of cash in the safe, and one day it was there and the next day it had gone, and you didn't know where it had gone, and you were the only one with the key. So but it was never like that. It was just a number on a screen. But it kind of, computers were a little bit magic to me back then. I know better now, but back in the day.
You told us about the journey to the Crown Court, how you ended up there. It involved an audit that had been undertaken.
Yeah.
Did you later discover something about what had been written concerning that audit? So later discover a document that had been written, the internal report.
Oh, yeah. Well, when Second Sight did their interim, when they did their final report, they wrote, they clipped a passage which we used in the Panorama programme, which said, having examined all the Horizon records, I can find no evidence of theft or deliberate cash-inflated figures.
Was that in a post office investigation report?
Well, what they did was when the Post Office investigation report came out, it was going to quote from all the documents that Second Sight had reported from, and they'd numbered everything in sequence. And the document, I was desperate to see what the rest of the investigators' report read, because it was only a little section from it. So I went to document 12, which was the document that Second Sight quoted from. And when I looked down the list, there was no document 12. They put the first page of my interview under caution as document 12, and the rest of it as document 13. And so I then emailed the post office and I said, please could I see document 12? I think you've labelled it wrong. And they said, oh, we're looking into it. And I got 3 replies saying, we're looking into it. And then eventually I said, well, that's all right. I'll get a copy of it from Second Sight. And they then wrote back to me and said, you will never have that document. It's a legally privileged document, and they don't know why Second Sight quoted it in their report.
Winding forward a long time, by the time you got to the Court of Appeal in 2021, did you get sight of that document?
I did, yeah.
And in summary, did it say exactly what Second Sight had said?
Yep.
That
Exactly.
no evidence.
There was that paragraph that, having examined all the Horizon records, I can find no evidence of theft or deliberate cash-inflated figures. But it was that piece that just made me so angry. When in Second Sight's report, it was just like, why did they do that?
So might that be an appropriate moment to take...
It would be. May I just ask one question on my own? Can I take you back to the plea bargain? and I just want to understand what went on. So, were the discussions about you pleading guilty all discussions taking place at court?
Between the lawyers.
Between the
yes,
lawyers,
yeah.
So it was discussions between the lawyers, and then you, a lawyer, would come back and report to you
Yeah.
what the post office lawyers were prepared to accept.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the post office never put any of that in writing, as far as you were aware.
As far as I was aware, yeah.
Fine. And the suggestion that you shouldn't say anything that was adverse about Horizon, that came directly from the post office lawyers to you lawyers,
Yeah.
as far as you were
Yeah.
aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's fine. We'll have
Very
a
much.
break.
So, should we say 1:15, please?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mrs. Hamilton, I want to move on to the consequences of what we have just discussed for you and try and look at it from a number of angles. Firstly, the direct financial consequences on you. Secondly, the indirect financial consequences that it had for you. Thirdly, the reputational effect that it had, or impact that it had. Fourthly, any effect on your health. And then lastly, effect on your family. So starting with directly financial issues, you've told us already that you were expected to repay money before your conviction.
Yes.
And in your statement, I think you say that you repaid in excess of £13,000 between 2004 and 2005.
Yeah.
And so was that a combination of actually giving money over and deductions from your salary?
Yes. Yeah.
As part of the agreement that had been reached, the bargain that had been drawn, you were to repay £36,000.
Yeah.
Was that in addition to the 13 that you had
Yes.
already
Yeah.
repaid?
That's
You've
£1,000 cost.
And the £1,000 costs. You told us that you remortgaged your house, and there was a whip round to try and make up the balance of the £36,000. And you borrowed some money from
A friend.
friends as well.
Yeah.
You say in your statement that the post office was repaid £50,644 in total.
Yeah.
What does that sum consist of?
2 lots of remortgaging, and well, I mean we used credit cards to fund the shop as well, which ended up spiralling out of control. But actually, the monies I repaid and the wages that they kept was I've been paying interest on the mortgage ever since. So, yeah.
You say in your statement that you had debts at the point of conviction.
Yes.
And you had to sell a piece of land.
Yeah. Yeah. We had an old dilapidated garage that we'd never used, and we never used part of the garden. My parents were getting older, and they didn't use part of the garden. And we'd always decided when we reached retirement or near retirement, we would try and see if we could get planning permission to demolish the garage and put a small house up there. And but we ended up having to sell the plot to kind of try and give us some running money, because the mortgage interest rate was much higher than it is now back then, and I couldn't pay the mortgage, and I thought I was going to lose everything.
And did you split the proceeds?
Yeah.
Between you on the one hand and your mum and dad on the other?
Mum and dad on the other, yeah.
And what did you use your half of the proceeds for?
I mean, I chucked mine into the shop and basically helped me keep paying the mortgage, because I had racked up my credit cards by that time. So I basically used it until it ran out. Mum and dad, the only good thing, if there is a good thing that could come out of it, was it gave them enough money to go and visit my brother, who lived in New Zealand, a few times. So they managed to go and see him, which was good.
And so you paid off some of your debts and maintained the monthly payments on the mortgage.
Yeah, yeah.
What were you working as at this time?
Well, the shop ended up, I realised I couldn't keep the shop going any longer. And I then, because of my criminal record, I've ended up cleaning because people in the village know I'm honest, and they've taken me on as a cleaner, dog walker. I look after houses when they're away and things like that. So, yeah, I've kept myself busy.
So, just like you've done before, you worked in
Turn
the
my
post
hand to
office.
anything.
You turned your hand to
Yeah.
things. Now, and since this time, the conviction, is that casual, informal labour in the community?
Yes, yeah.
Had you got a plan to, in fact, work in a different field?
Well, we'd always thought eventually we would sell the shop, and as a going concern, and you know, decide on where our future was. And I'd enjoyed the bit of care work that I did, but it took all of that away because you couldn't work in any way. If you needed a CRB check, it wouldn't. I didn't pass any CRB checks. And in the school, I'd been the classroom assistant and had to leave. I'd been to look after my granddaughter and help make Easter bonnets, and the classroom assistant had to leave the room, and because they knew I had a criminal record, they had to ask me to leave the room, which was awful because it was as embarrassing for them as me because we all knew each other and they knew I had a criminal record. It's things like that you don't realise how far it impacts your life to have a record.
So it narrowed your employment opportunities, having a criminal record.
Yes.
You told us about the village turning out in your support
Yes.
for the Crown Court sentencing hearing at Winchester. That sounds as if your reputation wasn't harmed.
Well, the people that knew me came and supported me,
Yes.
and the other people that didn't know me would probably read what was on the front of the paper, because I went to fill the car up the same week, and the local paper was on the counter, and it had £36,000 postal as fraudster, and I was the front page, and you just realise then that people might see you and think you're a thief.
Did you think that, notwithstanding the villagers, the close villagers that supported you, there was nonetheless gossip about what you had done?
Yeah. And there'll always be people that doubt it anyway. Even some people in the village probably doubt, but, you know, I was very lucky that a lot of people believed in me.
Any other sort of reputational harm or damage that you can think of?
Not reputational. It just is a horrible thing to be accused of dishonesty when you're not dishonest.
You've told us about the direct financial impact, the need to sell something that you had planned to use in a different way,
Yeah.
the narrowing of employment opportunities and the harm it caused to your reputation. What effect did it have on your family life?
Well, my mum and dad both had strokes within 3 months of each other. And then sadly, they weren't here to see my conviction quashed. And I believe it was the stress of everything I went through and the fact that they'd racked their credit cards up to try and keep my shop going. I mean, they'd never been in debt in their lives, and they ended up giving me everything to keep me going so that, you know, we just kept borrowing and using the house, and I used their credit cards to pay shop bills, and because it was just, the whole thing was just like a financial nightmare.
Can I ask, when did your parents pass?
My dad was January 16. They both had strokes in 2014, and my dad died in 16 and mum died in 17.
Was that before the Court of Appeal hearing?
Yeah, my dad died just as we got the GLO awarded, and my mum died 4 days before, and I promised her I'd go, but 4 days before the case management conference for the first trial, first of the trials.
And so they passed without knowing that
Yeah.
you...
They knew I'd never stop fighting to prove my innocence, but they still weren't there on the day.
You tell us in your statement, and if you don't mind discussing it now, this has had an impact on your health, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've almost become obsessed by fighting for justice, and I can't sleep nights. You know, I just literally, it goes round and round in my head. I'm so frustrated at where we are now, and although I've got my conviction quashed, I just feel the injustice of all of it for everybody, especially the 555 who I stood alongside and fought for justice with. It's just frustration, anger, and I can't ever get it out of my head.
I'm going to come to some of the things that you did as a result in a moment, but just dealing with you at the moment, if we may. You tell us in your statement that you've been diagnosed with an adjustment disorder and mixed anxiety and depressive disorder, all consequent upon what happened with Horizon after 2003. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into detail, but is it right that you're having some treatment for that?
Yes. Yeah.
So you told us we ended the narrative of you being sentenced at the Winchester Crown Court, and then you said you got lots of calls from people saying you're not alone, this has happened to me.
Yeah, literally the call started, but I got back to the shop same day, and the very next day someone rang me, and she'd been a sub-postmistress in Bournemouth, and she said they know exactly what's going on. She said I proved, I had every docket. She said they know exactly what's happened because I proved it. And then I had various phone calls, and the guy in the next village down came, and he'd been accused of the same thing. He came to see me, and then people started Googling about Post Office, and Alan Bates had set up postofficevictims.org in 2002, and we kind of gradually got in touch with each other, and then we met Noel, and we put the Welsh TV programme together, and Computer Weekly did an article on 7 of us. They phoned me in 2008 and asked if I'd give my story, and that kind of was the beginning, really, of the JFSA, because gradually it kind of mushroomed out.
And so it grew organically from the villagers to meeting Mr. Bates.
Yeah.
And then I think eventually in November 2009, you met 17 sub-postmasters at Penny Compton Village Hall. Yeah,
we had the first JFSA meeting. I'd met Noel by then because there was a Welsh TV programme in 2009, I think it was. They came as
BBC Wales.
Yeah, BBC Wales, yeah. Yeah, and Noel came down to the village, and they filmed us in the village, so it was all... from being told you're the only person it's ever happened to, we suddenly realised our stories were all identical. It was quite a moment in the village hall.
I think you met Kay Linnell.
Yeah, that was at one of the village do's. She was, I ended up sitting next to her for a pudding course, and
For a what, sorry?
For a pudding course. You had starters in one house, dinner in another, and a pudding in another.
Oh, okay.
And
sorry, I completely misunderstood. I thought you meant a course about puddings.
That would be nice.
No, okay, that's my mind, not yours.
And she was there at the pudding course, which ended up stretching for about 4 hours because we didn't come home till about 2:00 in the morning because we got deeply engrossed in post office conversation. And she'd been a customer anyway, and she hadn't really realised what was going on. And she then became one of the best friends I've ever had. I think she stood beside us and helped Alan, and she knows her way inside and out and everywhere.
Now, this group, I think, eventually formed up to bring proceedings in the High Court. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you had to find a legal team, didn't you?
Yes.
And you were part of the group that went to the High Court.
Yes, yeah.
Can you tell us what the experience was of that litigation? I know that's a very open question.
I'm in total awe of Justice Fraser. I couldn't believe this massive courtroom and all these people in it, and it was literally like going into battle.
In what sense was it like going into battle?
Well, it was like a small army of our lawyers on that side and matched by an even bigger army on that side. And the whole thing was just like a mass theatre almost.
Did you attend court on most days?
I did, yeah. I became obsessed. And it was mind-blowing, the whole thing. But Justice Fraser cut through it. You know, he could see... I mean, sometimes you listen to, especially in the Horizon trial, some of the arguments that they made, and you're like, well, I know I'm not legally qualified, but it's like, that's completely bonkers. And he just cut right through it. And, yeah, we won 2 trials.
And by that, you're referring to the judgment number 3 on common issues and judgment number 6 on Horizon issues?
On Horizon, yeah.
And did you participate in the mediation?
Yes, I did, yeah. Yeah, I got to look in the eyes of the CEO and General Counsel for Post Office and tell them our stories. But, you know, I don't know. It's a job to know how people actually really think. I thought we were sort of making a difference by speaking, but I doubt that now.
Did you receive money under the mediated agreement?
Yes, I did. I received a total of £18,000, and yeah,
Was that?
the lifesaver.
I was about to say, was that money welcome at the time?
Yes, because my husband needed an operation, which we ended up paying for because he needed to keep working. Because even though he was in his 70s, he was still gardening, and we still needed. Mum and Dad were gone by that time, and he needed to keep working because I didn't want to sell the house until I knew that we'd come out the other side of it, and so we had to pay for an operation for him to patch him up and get him back to work.
So he worked as a gardener?
Yeah.
I think he had a hernia, is that?
Yeah, he had a hernia, yeah.
It's a hernia repair.
Hernia repair, yeah.
Now, have you, was that adequate recompense in monetary terms for the
No.
losses that you had suffered?
No, because I'd given them 50 so far. That's without all the rest of it that, you know, it's nothing, really.
Did you sell the business in 2014?
Yes. I started trying to sell it in 2013, but it took about a year to offload because it's not attractive without a post office.
And selling the business, did that include all the stock, fixtures and fittings?
Yeah.
And despite that, was it still necessary for you to carry on working as you were doing informal casual labour and your husband
Yeah.
to work as a gardener?
Yeah.
Did you still carry a mortgage?
Yeah, we've still got a mortgage.
Still
even
to this day?
Yeah.
And notwithstanding selling off the piece of land that you've mentioned?
Yeah, because we sold it in 2008, and we got a fraction of what we would have got for it now. Well, we'd have built the house on it now, but...
More recently, have you approached the post office seeking compensation?
Yes, my claim is in.
Under what scheme did you make that claim?
Well, I did it through Hudgels, through the compensation scheme.
And did you, in fact, receive payment quite promptly by way of an
Yes.
interim payment?
Yeah, I've had an interim payment, yeah. So I managed to pay back people that lent me money and treat myself and put some money in the bank in case it takes a while to get the rest of the money.
And just help us there, how promptly after making the application under the scheme and receiving the money was it? How long?
Probably 2 or 3 months. Yeah, something like that. It was quite quick.
And can you remember when you made the application and when you got the money?
I think I got the money in September
2021.
2021. Yeah, yeah,
So about 2 or 3 months before
yeah,
then.
yeah.
Can you help us with the indirect financial costs of this? Can you give us an example of something that maybe we wouldn't think of naturally as this having an indirect financial impact on you?
Well, just that we're still paying the mortgage, and I don't know.
I'm thinking, for example, did you have car insurance?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. When I was prosecuted, you had to pay. Well, it was difficult, very difficult to get insurance with someone with a conviction, and even though my mum insured the house, she had to declare I was on it, and they racked up the premium.
So that was
all of your insurances, business insurance, house insurance, car insurance, everything carries a premium for someone who's got a fraud conviction.
and so those were all inflated
Yeah,
because of your
Because
conviction.
of my conviction, yeah.
I think you entered a debt plan at some stage
Yep,
as well.
I entered a debt plan in 2010 because I just couldn't service all the credit cards. But once I got my interim payment, I settled them all. So I've got rid of all. So the only debt I've got now is my mortgage.
And did you pay off your mum's debts too, where she had lent you money?
We paid them until the day she died, and then they were written off.
So what position are you in now then?
We've just got a big mortgage, and yeah.
Standing back, are there things that you want to tell us about as to the human impact that this has had on you that we haven't covered so far?
Well, just that I find it so sad that it's gone on for so many years and literally wipes people. We're all exhausted. We've had almost 20 years of fighting, and people aren't with us that should be. People like Julian Wilson, who you'll hear from Karen, he's not here, and his conviction. There's other people too that have died and not had their names cleared, and I just find it. I'm so angry, and I'm so angry about the group that they're refusing to compensate. They said they've had a full and final settlement, and that isn't right because the mediation wasn't right. They knew they'd run us out of money.
So just winding back a couple of things that you said there. You said they knew they had run us out of money. What do you mean by that?
Well, they knew we couldn't fight further.
Who's the they?
Post Office. But yeah, Post Office knew we couldn't fight further because the funding pot was literally dry. We'd won 2 court victories, and so they limited the disclosure for the mediation and the settlement, and they basically ran us out of road, and we were forced to accept the 58 million, which sounds a lot, but if litigation funding isn't covered, if you can't recover the cost of litigation, then you're up against it. So there was a point in which the scales would tip, and the Post Office knew it. And as for full and final, well, there's people that have lost a whole pile of money, and they deserve compensation for it.
You said in an answer before last that Julian Wilson isn't with us.
Yeah.
Tell us about your relationship with Julian Wilson.
Well, we teamed up with Alan back in the beginning days of the JFSA.
So Mr. Bates.
Mr. Bates, yeah, and Noel, and we kind of fought beside him, and we all of us went on fact-finding missions and gathering people together. And I went to the select committee hearing in 2015 with him, and he was always there, and he was always like having someone to run stuff by. And then he got cancer, and sadly he said, "Oh, I'm going to be there to the end," and I went to see him just before he died.
How long before he died?
About 3 days before he died. We had a JFSA meeting, and because it was close to where he lived, I went to see him, and I promised him I'd never stop until I cleared his name. And it's things like that. And Peter Holmes, he's not here either. You know, people that were there back in the beginning. And
Tell us about what you know and your relationship with Peter Holmes.
I just met him at some JFSA meetings. I wasn't as close to him as Julian, but Julian was such a team player, and it impacts people's health.
You say in your statement, I've not been able to stop for one day. I'm drained and tired. I've lost the best years of my life. These years have been stolen from me and from my family. I feel worn down, but I'm so angry about what happened.
I'm really angry about what happened, yeah, and I am tired. It's like I've had today here, and then I've got to go and work like the clappers to make up for the fact I haven't been at work today, tomorrow, and it shouldn't be. I should be able to take a week off or something like that, but I can't.
What about the time that it's allowed you to devote to your family?
Well, my eldest son went through uni, and I couldn't help him, and I haven't had the time with the grandchildren. I haven't been able to sort of take a week off and take them away and do things that normal grandparents do. And I probably, much as I was at home with my mum, I was always in and out, and I say I'll be back in an hour, back in 2 hours, you know, doing all these little jobs, and it's time, you know, it's things like that. You realise you can't go back.
You conclude your statement by saying that the post office had blood on their hands. They've destroyed thousands of lives, and I believe the web of lies and deceit spans much further than the post office to government and beyond. And after all of that, I know I'm lucky to have had a criminal conviction. Why do you feel lucky to have had a criminal conviction?
Because I've got a chance of getting compensation, and they haven't. They've been refused it. I mean, the government keep on flatly refusing. They say, you know, you've had a full and final settlement. Well, that's not right. I was at the select committee with a guy, I think it was Christmas time, or just after Christmas, or just before, I can't remember.
This is the Bays Select Committee.
Yeah, the Bays Select Committee, and he's given Post Office over £100,000, and he's had £20,000 back, and it's just not right.
And so what you're referring to as feeling lucky to have had a criminal conviction.
Yeah, so I could get.
That's a gateway to receiving compensation under
Yeah.
the scheme that the post office is operating.
Yeah,
And you're comparing that to those that haven't been criminally convicted, but who were part of the 555.
yeah, and I've lost everything, including homes, marriages. I mean, I know a really good friend of mine. She lost her home because of it, and she didn't get. They got her to the court steps and said it's not in the public interest. I mean, it's wrong.
Mrs. Hamilton, they're the only questions that I want to ask of you today. Chair, do you have questions for Mrs. Hamilton?
No, I don't have any questions. I'm sorry that you've had to put yourself through this, but I'm very grateful for you doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please do return to your seat, Mrs. Hamilton. Chair, I'm in your hands as to whether we proceed with Mr. Blake, who asked questions of the next witness now.
What is the time? I'm sorry, I don't...
4:45.
It's 4:45. How do you feel, first of all, Mr. Thomas, you are next up. Would you like to start this afternoon? And
Mind, sir, if it helps you.
well,
But because tomorrow, Lorraine behind me is after, and we need to go back tomorrow.
well, I think perhaps we should make a start in those circumstances. So let's start, Mr. Thomas, see how we get on.
In which case, I hand over to Mr. Blake.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
And for everyone to understand, so that they either don't rush or they break at a convenient moment. I'm quite happy to stay here until about 5. So if we could complete it by 5, that's fine. But if we can't, then we'll just break off and we'll complete it when we're ready in the morning. All right? Welshman can't help but address other Welshmen in Welsh, can he, Mr. Thomas? It's all right. It's all right. I think I guessed that.
I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Diolch, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. My name's Julian Blake, and I'm going to be asking questions this afternoon on behalf of the Chair,
Thank you.
and possibly into tomorrow morning as well.
Okay.
Could you give your full name, please?
Ewan Oil Thomas.
Mr. Thomas, you've given 2 witness statements. Both of those statements should be in front of you.
Yes.
Could I ask you to look at the first of those witness statements? That should be the 12th of January.
Yes.
Do you see your signature at the end of that statement?
Yes.
And when you made it, was it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
True to my best, yes.
And the second witness statement, I think, is dated the 10th of February.
Yes.
Again, do you see your signature at the end of that?
Yes, I do.
And when you made that, was it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to begin by asking you a few questions about your background.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
75.
And where were you born and where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little village called Mastraeth on the Isle of Anglesey.
I wasn't going to try and pronounce it myself.
No,
That's why I asked you.
I perhaps a win can.
I'm not going to put myself to that test.
One of your first jobs was as a postman. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I started in 1965, June the 6th, as a postman in a place, I'll challenge you again, a place called Bodogan. I used to get up at 4 in the morning, go to the sorting office, meet the railway train, the mail train in those days, take the bags to the sorting office and then go on a 17-mile round trip delivering the post.
And I think after that job, you worked with your wife for a little bit, is that right?
Yes, in 1974, my wife and I, before that, decimalisation, 1972, my mother had a grocery shop. She bought it in 1964. That's why I came to work, help her out. I was an only child. She bought the shop for the grand sum of £1,600. My father thought she was mad, but anyway, we bought the shop and I came into the business. And I married in 1969, and my wife and I took over in about 1972-73 because my mother couldn't get her head round the decimalisation. She'd been used to a 1.11 and a 3 pence and whatever, and when it came to the new money, as she used to call it, the silly money, she just couldn't get on with it.
And in 1981, you bought your first post office.
Yes.
And where was that?
That was in a village called Gairwen, on the old A5, about 3 miles from Llanfairpwll Gwyngyll. I won't say the whole name, but that's so in.
I've had more challenges this
Yes,
afternoon, Mr.
we-
Thomas, than I normally get in a week.
Yes, it's the short one is Hannah PG.
Thank you. And in 1994, you took over as sub-postmaster.
Yes.
Up until 1999-2000, did you enjoy the job?
Yes, I did. It was all done on paper. And I used to help my wife because in those days I used to start at 5 in the morning. I used to finish delivering the mail by about 11:30, 12 o'clock. Then I used to do the afternoon shift, and my wife got on with her housework and looking after our 3 children.
I'm going to move on now to the problems that you experienced. Horizon was installed in about 1999-2000, and you said that you used a paper-based system before Horizon.
Yes,
is that right?
yes.
Did you receive training?
Yes, I had a day and a half in the Victoria Hotel in Llanberis with 5 other people who were at the time older than me, because I was quite sprightly in those days. And we had a day and a half, but unfortunately Horizon didn't arrive in my office till getting on for about 9 months afterwards. So really it was quite a challenge.
And how soon was it that you noticed problems with Horizon?
I first had, according to my statement, I first had one in about 2003 when I found a discrepancy of £6,000. I contacted head office and we sorted it out in the statement. The area manager came, who I'd worked with in the post office before, and a lady called Mrs. Van der Broeken came. She was the area manager for Wales and the Marches at that time. And we sat in our lounge and we had a cup of coffee, and she said, if you pay 3,000, we'll wipe off the other 3,000. So that's what happened then.
So I think that was a specific problem in 2003.
Yes.
Is that right? And in general terms, did you experience other problems with Horizon?
Yes. There was things we kept putting money in, but unfortunately I haven't got the records. We started putting about 100, 200, maybe 500 quid in sometimes. And of course, in 2004, I think I had an audit which was clear. Everybody was happy.
We'll get to the audit in a
Yeah,
minute.
sorry.
But before the audit happened, did you use the helpline at all?
Yes, I did.
And did you find that useful or
No.
why not?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I think everything had come in a rush. Because I had colleagues that I had worked with in the post office, because the post office and the counter staff were all one at one time before the post office was split. And I was getting friends coming and checking with me, and honestly, I felt that they didn't have the experience that was needed.
And you didn't find them helpful?
No.
Apart from noticing shortfalls, did you experience other problems with the system?
Yes. What you call it? We had a busy road outside the old A5 before the A55, and we had a problem with electricity going off and having to back up. And that was taking time. And then sometimes when you put the Horizon on in the morning, it wouldn't come on. Or in the middle of a transaction, it would go off.
And let's move on to that audit and the investigation. So you said that you had an audit in 2004 and 2005 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And that one went okay, did it?
Yes.
And then you had another in October 2005.
Yes. 13th October.
And How did that come about?
I had a knock on the door at 7:30 in the morning, and 2 auditors came in. I gave them a figure of what I was losing, and about 2 hours after they completed their audits, they came to me and said that they agreed with me, and they had to phone head office, and at the time the head office was in Chester. In the meantime, I had phoned the helpline on more than a dozen occasions. I'd kept a record on a calendar that the post office gave us, and I kept a record on there, and I was phoning helpline up, and they were telling me just to carry on.
Yeah.
And I carried on, and that was the biggest mistake I ever did, I think.
So were you expecting the auditors when they arrived?
I was expecting them sometime, but they didn't come. And then all of a sudden, October the 13th, 2005, they're in the door 7:30 in the morning.
And you've said that you kept records. What did you do with them? Did you manage to keep
Post
them?
office took them, sir. They hoovered my office. I didn't have a shred of paper left. Even my council work went. Everything went.
So when you say your council work, you were a local council at
Yes.
that time. How did you feel when they arrived and were carrying out?
Well, I expected the worst, to be quite honest, and it did become the worst. And as I said, the worst thing was they afterwards, in about a week, they cleared my office. They took the keys of the shop. My wife ran a small business selling cards, stationery and knickknacks, and we weren't allowed to go in at all because we didn't have the keys.
And they told you that there was a shortfall of around £48,000.
Yes.
And a cheque discrepancy of nearly £2,000. Is
Yes.
that right? And
Yes.
I think you were aware of that kind of a figure
Yes.
in advance.
Yes, I gave that figure of around 50,000 to the auditors when they came that morning.
And at some stage, the police became involved as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the lady auditor said to me that she had to report it to head office, and about an hour and a half after she told me that, 2 investigators came.
Is this the same day as the auditors?
Yes. A lady came in and a gentleman with her. The lady was quite robust. She wanted to interview me on my own. I refused. And at the time, the post office had arranged for another postmaster to come around the office. And I said, well, I'll have an interview with Mr. Jim Evans sitting by. She wouldn't have that. So that conversation finished, and she said they had to go outside and make a couple of telephone calls. And within half an hour, 2 policemen arrived. And she walked through the door and she said, cuff him, he's a thief.
And you went away with the police to the police station?
No, I didn't, because the 2 policemen knew me, and I knew them. And one of them said, no, I'm not going to cuff him. He said, Noel will find his way to Holyhead police station for an interview. And she was quite aggressive, actually. But I followed with my daughter and my sister-in-law, and I went to Holyhead police station for an interview.
And how many people were interviewing you?
2.
And were they from the police, the post office?
Yes.
And how long did that interview last?
6 hours.
How do you feel you were treated during that interview?
Oh, terrible. She wanted me, the lady was quite aggressive with the sergeant in charge, wanting me to be put in a cell. And when I walked in, first of all, she wanted me cuffed. And thankfully, again, I knew one of the policemen, and he said no. And I got a cup of tea and I waited for a solicitor to call, and a solicitor, Mr. Ian Williams, came, and I was interviewed alongside him.
And after that interview, you were suspended, is that right?
Yes,
And you had your contract terminated.
yes.
And I'm going to move on to the criminal proceedings that were brought. Approximately how long after that were you charged with a criminal offence?
I was charged about February the following year. The first, I think, I went to Llangefni Magistrates Court to be charged, and then I was passed on to the Crown Court. And over the months leading up to November the 6th, when I was charged,
So that's
was
November the
sent
6th.
to jail. I had to go about once a month either to Mold, Crown Court, or to Carnarvon, just to say my name and and plead guilty or not guilty at the time, and that's what happened.
And what offences were you charged with?
I was charged with theft.
And you had a trial in November 2006, is that
Yes.
correct? You've described in your statement being offered a plea bargain. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, about 10 minutes before I went into court, my barrister came, Mr. Wyn Jones from Chester, came up to me and said, they're offering you a bargain. And I said, what is it? And he said, they're going to drop the theft as long as you take the charge of false accounting, and also you don't mention Horizon. And I said, well, what does that mean? Will you keep me out of jail? And he said, well, hopefully. And I think, I can't remember, but I did sign a piece of paper with my barrister to say that I wouldn't mention Horizon. And when I went to court, of course, well, we know what happened.
So you accepted that bargain?
Yes.
And you pleaded guilty?
Yes,
And you were sentenced on the 6th of November
yes,
to 9 months imprisonment.
yes.
Can you describe for us how you felt on receiving that punishment?
Well, he said, by the way, they had changed the judge. I'd had a judge right through, and on the day, Mr. Roderick took over, and he sentenced me, and he said 9 months, and I expected a suspended sentence, but unfortunately, he said take him down.
And how did you feel then?
Well, awful, because I didn't expect it. I'd never been a criminal in my life, and I was taken down, and eventually I landed up in Walton in Liverpool.
Can you remember some of the words that the judge used when he was sentencing you?
Yes, he'd had, well, a lot of letters, actually, very powerful ones from people supporting me. And he read some of them out, and he said that I was a man of a character, and I'd fallen down in life, having been a counsellor and a postmaster all my life. But unfortunately, I was sent down.
I know it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to ask you a little bit about your time in prison.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your first week in prison in Liverpool?
Hell.
What kind of a prison is that?
Very old. Arrived there, I was taken, me and a few others, we were taken to Wrexham first, and then we landed in Walton in Liverpool. I was unfortunate, actually. I was on the wrong side of the van, and I was supposed to go to Allcost, but there was no room, so I landed up in Walton. And when I landed up in Walton, I had the indignity of having to have a shower in front of a prison warden, taken to a cell. I was there for 8 days.
Were you able to contact your family while
No.
you were there?
And during that time, I wasn't allowed only out for my food. Sorry.
Okay, take your time. If you would like a break at any time,
Yeah.
please do.
No, it's all right. I had to just go out for food. And 15 minutes at about dinner time on the landing, about half an hour in the evening, maybe. And that's how it was for 8 days.
Can you remember why you weren't able to contact your family?
Because they couldn't process, they were short-staffed or something, and they were they couldn't process. And not only that, what hurt me at the time, being Welsh, I wrote 2 or 3 Welsh letters, and I got them returned, because at the time they didn't have any staff that could translate what I'd written.
There came a time a week later, I think, that you were transferred to an open prison, is that
Yes.
right? And which prison was that?
Kirkham, near, well, between Preston and Blackpool.
And can you tell us a little bit about your time there?
Yes, it was an open prison. It wasn't a place you wanted to be. I settled in, and I had a job in the greenhouses. It was a big farm. It was run by Lancaster College, I believe, and they were producing a lot of vegetables and all the rest of it. And the greenhouses were quite big. I think there was about somewhere not far short of about 5 acres of glass there. And at the time, we were just tidying up, sterilising and what you call it, but at least the days went quicker.
And it's right to say you had your 60th birthday in
Yes.
that prison. On the 19th of January 2007, you were released from prison,
Yes,
and a condition of your release being that you were put on a tag.
yes.
How was that?
Not nice, because you weren't allowed out of the house before 7 in the morning, and you had to be back in at 7 at night. At the time, having lost everything, I went to live with my daughter in Maltraeth.
And was it peaceful at night, or were you disturbed?
No, disturbed, because they couldn't get a signal, and it was quite often they used to knock on the door and come and check if I was there.
So the electronic tag had a signal, and if it lost that signal,
Yes.
they'd think you may
I
have...
think I'd have
run
gone
away.
AWOL.
I'm going to move on to the impact on you, financial impact and personal impact. We have time. Would you like a brief break at all? Or
No, I'm all right. Carry on if you like.
So I'm going to start with the financial impact. It's right to say that you still had to pay for the shortfall that you owed. Is that right?
Yes.
And how did you afford that?
I didn't, to be quite honest. I became bankrupt in 2008, 2007, 2008. I had to. I was very lucky. I sold my house, or the house it was then, because the business had gone to my younger son, who was sitting there. And that managed to clear up a few debts. But unfortunately, with what I owed the post office under pressure, they were kept sending letters wanting the money. I went bankrupt, and because my wife's name was on some things, we had quite a problem, actually, trying to sort my side of it out and my wife's side. And it took about 2 years for my wife to get her pension, private pensions back and things like that.
And what
It took
happened
a
to
long
your
time.
pension?
I lost it. I went, they took my private pensions in the process of crime in Mold. Because I'd worked for the post office for 42 years in all, they had the lawyer, the London lawyer, stood on his feet and told the judge that he wanted to stop my pension.
So as part of the sentencing, there was a Proceeds of Crime Act
Yes.
application,
Yes.
and that led to you losing your pension.
It didn't, thank goodness, thanks to the judge, Mr. Nick Parry. He put them right, and he said no, because I'd worked for the post office for 42 years, paid a pension, and they thought that they could, if they could stop that would be part of the money that would be paid back.
But you did lose your savings.
Yes.
And who did you live with at that time?
I lived with my daughter until I got a pensionier's bungalow in the village that we had our post office in Gairwen.
And you told us before that you were a counsellor before your conviction.
Yes.
What happened to that position?
I lost it, unfortunately. Between my post office salary and my council salary, I was earning somewhere in the region of 45,000 at the time. The post office salary was somewhere about 29, 30,000, and my council salary was somewhere in the region of about 15.
And you lost that as well?
Yes.
And what about the shop? What happened to the shop and the money that you...
Well, we had to, my wife had to sell her cards cheap, and the shop was empty, and we just couldn't open it because we didn't have the keys and they wouldn't give them back.
And what do you do for work now?
I used to work in the garden centre up to December, my birthday. I did 6 years in the garden centre, 3 days a week. Before that, I took on a job with, I managed to buy a van, and I used to be a courier for a company called Yodel. I did that for 4 years. So to make ends meet.
And do you still struggle financially?
No, it's better. I did get a bit of compensation, which I suppose you will mention, so that's helped.
You can tell us about that now if you'd like.
Well, the first one was the settlement after the 2 court cases of, so-called 50-odd million, but only about £11 million was shared out between 500,000 of us. I managed to get 11,000 out of that, and about 3 weeks afterwards, I had a very nice letter saying, with another £3,000 in it, saying for an inconvenience of going to jail.
And who was that from?
That came from the settlement through Freeds.
I'm going to move on now to the personal impact on you. How did you sleep during the period that we've talked about today?
Terrible. I couldn't shut the bedroom door. I found it very hard. That was more anything from the first 8 days. And I did that in Kirkham as well. I never shut the door. That took a lot out of me, to be quite honest. Or a door slamming, I always used to get very agitated.
So being confined or hearing
Yes.
particular noises
Yes,
reminds you of your time in
Yes.
prison.
yes.
And you've had a formal diagnosis, I think, of adjustment disorder, is that right?
Yes, my family doctor was very, very good with me in the beginning. I managed to get some help. And also living in Anglesey, I went for walks I used to walk 4 or 5 miles a day, just being outside, even in the rain.
How would you describe the psychological impact on you of all of this?
It was horrible, I'll be honest. And the worst thing about it was I was sent to jail. My family had to face the public.
And there's a reputational damage there. How was your reputation before all of this?
It was fantastic. Like, what you call it, the gentleman in the beginning, you were a pillar of the community. People used to, not only for post office work, but they used to come for advice. They used to help them fill forms and stuff like that up. You know, you were, they had confidence in you, and you know, they looked at you for advice.
And how did people treat you after the conviction?
A mixture. Living in a small community and having been a postman, I travelled from one end of the island to the other. I think in my time I delivered to about 20 different rounds, post office rounds, from Benllech on one side of the island to Rosnaiga and Aberfraw. You know, you knew people, and when you went to a place like the town centre in Llangefni, you had people, you know, I even had one shout, shut the door, the thieves arrived. You know, you expect it.
It was in the paper at the time, I think, in the newspaper,
Yes.
right? What was the impact of that on you and on your family as well?
It wasn't very nice to have your family look at pictures of you being led into a van to go away, handcuffed. You know, it's not nice.
And we've spoken about your wife, who's visibly upset in court today. What about other members of your family? What was the impact on them?
There's my daughter, by the way.
Ah, sorry, your daughter, sorry.
My wife's not a very, she doesn't like, she's very quiet, very firm. She's the boss of the house, but she's not, she doesn't like to be in the limelight, if you call it that. My son there, and unfortunately we lost Arvan 2 years ago. He was 50.
Mr. Beer asked a question of a previous witness, that is, what do you want from the post office?
Just this. I want to find out who knew. Because in my time, I've looked back, there's been 4 different governments, so you can't blame one government. There's been different ministers in charge of buys, as you call it. I was prosecuted in the Royal Mail when the Countess and Royal Mail were together, because I think it was 2011, maybe you correct me, when they split. You know, these people knew. Were quite prominent people, when you look back, knew what was going on. They've gone on their way. They've gone into greener pastures, if you like. They've gone with their bonuses and their multi-million-pound back pocket checks and all the rest of it. And why haven't they? Why didn't they pick it up? Why didn't they sort it out and let it drag on like this?
The final topic I'd like to talk to you about is raising awareness, because you've been quite involved in raising awareness. And I want to talk to you about 2008 and 2009. In 2008, you were contacted by somebody called Roche Gerard, is that correct?
A colleague of a village gentleman that lived in South Warnborough, who knew Joe very well.
And can you describe your first contact?
Yes, I had a letter of him, and at about the same time I was talking to Taro Now, a Welsh, small Welsh panorama programme, if you like, and I'd got to know about them through a BBC reporter called Sean Tequin, who I'd been quite involved with through my council work. We used to talk a lot, and if anything happened on the island, he would speak to me, maybe. And Rosh wrote a letter, and that was the beginning of the matter as far as I was concerned.
I'm going to ask for that letter to be brought up on the screen if we can.
Yes.
It may take a moment, and it's, I think, your first exhibit. There, it's on the screen to your right.
Yes.
So is that the letter that you received,
Yes.
2008?
Yes.
Can you tell us, on receiving that letter for the first time, how did you feel?
That I wasn't the only one, because as you heard from Joe and the gentleman at the beginning, the first thing the post office were telling you that you were the only one, there was nobody else. And at the time, of course, there was no way of you finding out.
And I think he sent you an article, and we'll move on to the second of your exhibits.
With a young picture of Joe.
It So is this?
Yeah, changed, Joe.
I think we heard Mrs. Hamilton talk about a newspaper article at the time, and this is it, is it?
Yes.
And again, knowing that you weren't the only person, that had quite an impact on you, didn't it?
Yes.
And then we have another letter behind that. That's the third exhibit. I think that confirms a conversation that you had
Yes.
with Mr. Gerard. So you spoke to him
Yes.
on the telephone.
Yes.
You also became involved in the Computer Weekly article, is that right?
Yes, the lady rang me up, and I think it was about 6 or 7 of us that spoke to her, and she ran it in one of her articles. Was it 2009, somewhere like that?
Yes. And how did you make contact with them originally?
Through Mr. Garrett. He came, but as I said, the Taro Now one was starting as well.
Yes.
So there was quite a lot going on at the time.
And Tara Now is it a program that you were aware of before?
Yes, it was quite a very good, well-run Welsh documentary or investigating program, actually, which had looked into a lot of other things before my story.
And can you just let us know how it was that you came to meet Miss Hamilton through Tara Now?
Yes, well, we went down to South Warnborough and we met in the cafe. We had a cup of tea. Mr. Garrett was there as well, and that's how we started.
Is there anything that you would like to add to your evidence that you've given today?
Yes, I'll say this much. I was very proud to work for the post office. I had 32 years of happiness, if you like. Having started, as I said, in 1965 for £3.76 a week, riding a bike for 70 miles. A postage stamp was only 3 pence in those days. I worked myself up. When I was a postman, I became a higher grade. I went to Cardiff to do that. And I also used to run, when the local sorting office manager was off, I used to do in charge, but I never took the job on. My postmaster's life was quite a happy life, working alongside my wife, and we have worked together for many, many years. But I'll put my life in 3 categories, if you like. I started in Bodorgan, as I mentioned. I'm going back again, in a place called Paradwys, which is, in English is paradise. It's a small community in Anglesey, and that's what's my first round. So I've been to paradise, and I've been to hell in Moulton, and I think that'll sum it up.
Chair, do you have any questions at all?
No, I don't have any questions. You will have heard me thank the 2 witnesses who became before you.
Yes.
Yeah? So I'm going to thank you in Welsh. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi.
Croeso. Thank you, sir.
That concludes the day. We will start again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
We will. Thanks to everyone. Now we'll depart without people standing again.